So welcome everyone to today's Grants for Lunch. As Amy said, we're here to talk about finding potential donors, DIY prospect research. So before we get started, I will introduce myself and my team who are going to be here talking to you today. I'm Emily Walsh. I'm the Senior Director of Development Research and Resources in the UA Foundation. I've been with the UA Foundation for a little over 3 years in this role. Prior to joining the foundation, I oversaw the research, prospect management, and analytics programs at the University of Chicago. And before joining the development profession, I was actually a cultural policy researcher in the city of Chicago. So with me today is Laura Margolis. She's waving up here in the front. She's our Associate Director of Prospect Research. Laura's been with the foundation for many years. Some of you have probably worked with her. This is sort of Laura's last hurrah. She's retiring March 20th. So glean the knowledge from her while she's here. Also with me is Susie Schwartz, our other Associate Director of Prospect Research. Susie's been with the foundation for a little over 4 years, and she'll be taking over Laura's position when Laura leaves. And Jason Schultz, our Prospect Research Analyst. Jason is a newbie to our team. He's been with us since December. So each of us is going to present on different topics on prospect research. So the Development Research and Resources Office at the UA Foundation is responsible for collecting, analyzing, and sharing information to guide the relationship building activity of the development program. We work directly with development officers, and we largely support their major and principal gift fundraising activity. So one of the things I want to point out, although we can't provide direct support to all of you in the room, we hope that some of the resources we're providing today and that are included in the session and some of the resource tips you have at your seats will help guide you to find good prospects for your programs. I think for those of you that do have a development officer you can tap into, you should always consider that as a good resource as well. One of our caveats is that at an institution this large, when you're doing research on prospects, you're likely to uncover prospects that may already be on the university's radar. So it's very important that we take a coordinated approach. So if you have a high capacity prospect that you're thinking about talking to, maybe check with the development program first. So basically, we're the people that know how to find information. It's what we do full time. And you'll notice throughout the presentation, we've actually included a few fun slides like this just to make sure everyone stays awake because we have a pretty content-heavy session today. So here are the questions we hope to address with our session today. I won't read them to you. I think most of you can read the slides. Can everyone in the back see this fairly clearly? Okay, good. We tried to make our font really large. So I recognize that we probably have a very mixed audience in the room. Some of the tools and techniques will probably be familiar to some of you, especially those of you that are maybe coming from an academic research background, but some of these may be brand new. So we hope that everyone in the room finds at least 1 or 2 things that are new to them that they can find useful. So from this session, we are essentially hoping that you develop a basic understanding of what prospect research is and how you can do it for free. There's a lot of resources out there that most people don't realize are free, and that's why we're here today. So first, a note of caution. We deal with this all the time in our office. Don't fall down the prospect research rabbit hole. And we've actually provided, I hope most of you can see this, Alice in Wonderland's White Rabbit. You'll notice throughout the presentation to provide tips and warnings of when this is likely to happen, because a lot of these resources you can start digging and digging and digging and digging, and there's got to be a point where you sort of stop and move on. So we struggle with that. You guys will probably struggle with that. So we've tried to make sure you know when to stop. So what is prospect research? Prospect research is really about strategically using the information available to you in the public sphere, and I'm going to emphasize public because we don't dig around in people's private bank accounts or look at credit reports. Laura will talk about that a bit more in a minute. It's using what we can find in the public sphere to help you make educated decisions about whether to ask for a gift. Doing prospect research should help you do these things. Determine whether you're engaging with the best prospect to support something they're passionate about for the right gift amount at the right time. So I know none of you can actually read this, but I wanted to include it in the handout, so when it's emailed to you, you'll have it. One of the big things we talk about a lot in research is how to ethically use the information we find. And I think as you guys start to delve into this, you'll realize that when you do research, you're really digging around in people's lives and backgrounds, and a lot of information is public that people might not necessarily realize is public. And so thinking about how to deal with that in an ethical and professional way is going to be really important. And this is a statement that comes from APRA. APRA is the Association of Professional Researchers for Advancement. It's an international organization for people that do the kind of work that my staff and I do, and we're all members. So we adhere to this policy pretty strictly, and I would say if you're going to embark on this, you may want to get familiar with how to ethically do research. So as you can see, there are many, many specialized research resources available to those of us that do this full time. These are the paid resources, but they're very expensive and they require a lot of specialized training. So the focus of our session today is on these free resources. And some of the ones listed on this slide are at least our favorites, but throughout the presentation we're going to be delving into many, many more. So the other thing I want to point out, hopefully this isn't like a deal breaker for any of you, is our focus today is really on how to research individuals, not necessarily foundations or corporate foundations. So if you need help with those things, definitely reach out to the Gift Center. They have some wonderful consulting services and they will help you. So affinity and capacity, both of these are very important when you think about prospecting. You don't want to just find wealthy people. You want to find wealthy people who also likely have affinity. Affinity is kind of that nebulous set of characteristics that indicates how much someone likes you, your program, or the project you're trying to raise money for. Capacity is really focused strictly on the ability to give. Does someone actually have the assets that make them capable of making a gift at a certain level? And your best prospects are those that have high affinity and high capacity. So it's important to identify both of those things. If you uncover someone that has, and I don't know if you guys can see this pointer, low affinity and low capacity, those probably aren't good prospects to pursue. The other common thing we see people try to chase after are these low affinity, high capacity prospects. Just because someone has money doesn't mean they're a good fit for you or what you're trying to raise money for. So think about those indicators carefully as well. One group that often gets overlooked are these high affinity, low capacity prospects. So they're really, really engaged, but they may not have the financial ability to make big gifts. These are people that I would say don't ignore because the potential can always come up in the future. And these are also going to be people that could be fabulous volunteers for you. They could be connectors and they could be social influencers. So don't ignore these people, but if you're really looking for gifts, you want to focus on high affinity and high capacity. This slide is really just a little word of warning. Don't be this dog. Imagine that the balls are prospects. Don't try to chase every prospect you come across. The whole reason we are teaching you about how to do some of this research is so you can whittle down your list to the people that are really the best fit for you. So let's get started. Where to start identifying and collecting names? Some of this may seem very obvious. Some of it may not, but I would say in all the years I've been doing this work, people often forget to talk to the people who are already supporting you. This is step one. If you have volunteers, if you have past donors, if you have people who've signed up for a newsletter, who've attended your events, look at that population first. You know there's affinity there. And then it's just figuring out is the wealth there as well. So I would say start at the top and kind of work your way down. Don't try to chase the dream donors. I know that's hard for everyone to hear. And by dream donors, I mean every local wealthy person. A good example of this is when I worked in Chicago. Every single nonprofit in Chicago thought they could solicit Oprah for a gift. We called it like the Oprah syndrome. Oprah's already very philanthropic, and her philanthropy is very clearly identified. She's not going to support every nonprofit. So I would say use that rule of thumb. Every wealthy person is not going to be a good prospect for you. So ideally, once you have a core group of potential donors identified through some of these methods, you would start diving into the prospect research on those people. And through the research process, you're really looking to further streamline that list, have some names fall off, maybe have some new names come on, but that's really what the research process is about. How do you streamline who you're going to actually approach and go after? So again, just reiterating this point, you really want to start at your core with your current supporters and work your way out. So today, these are the three main types of information we're going to be going over and how you can find this information. Each of the researchers on staff are going to be covering a different section. Jason will be talking about how you can find basic contact information. It's usually step one. You can't ask someone for money unless you know how to contact them. Laura will share some insights into how you can find wealth indicators that would indicate is the financial capacity actually there. And then Susie's going to talk about how you can find philanthropic affiliations. So are these people philanthropic? And if they are philanthropic, are they philanthropic in the areas that are aligned with what you're trying to raise money for? Again, just a good rule of thumb, because a lot of even professional researchers get sort of ignoring this. Pay attention to everything. Every piece of data you find will be a good indicator of whether you're on the right track or not. Some information that you uncover through your research may lead you to realize a person just really isn't a good fit, and that's okay. That's why you're doing it. So at this point, I'm going to stop talking and actually turn it over to Jason to fill you guys in on how to do this.
Thank you, Emily, and welcome everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm going to be talking about basically just how to contact someone, how to find very basic information about them, their address, their phone number, their email, employment information, and we'll be addressing specific websites that have this kind of information available. But as Emily said, pay attention to everything as you go along, because you may find other information that may lead to their wealth indicators or their philanthropic affiliations. So other basic biographic information you may uncover: the age, their history, either professional or educational history, educational background, their relatives, their hobbies and interests, maybe what they're interested in, and other tidbits just that you'll find as you research. So we're going to be starting with a tutorial on Google. I'm sure everyone uses Google and is familiar with Google. Not sure if everyone knows the tips and tricks and all the techniques that are available in Google. So this also applies to other search engines if you're more comfortable with Bing or Yahoo, or how many people are familiar with DuckDuckGo? Those are the paranoid people that don't want to be tracked by the government. It's actually a great search engine too. For Google, some of the techniques, I'm going to list them real quick and then we're going to go through them in a little bit more detail. So quotation marks to search for exact phrases. If you've ever done a search for University of Arizona without using quotation marks around it, you're going to find that Arizona State comes up, Northern Arizona University comes up, and we don't want to know about those places. We just want University of Arizona. Also, a plus sign will force inclusion of a term in your results. Sometimes Google just determines that you don't really need that term in your results. So we can force the inclusion of it. Same with a minus sign. You can exclude a term if Google is just insist on returning something that you don't really want to see. There's also the asterisk, which is usually known as a wildcard. I've heard it referred to lately as a vague search, which I really like. So we're going to be using the example John something Smith. If you don't know John Smith's middle name, you can put an asterisk in there, and we'll see that in a minute. And then the algebra equation at the bottom, I'm not sure if you can see it, but it's plus, which means force the inclusion of something in parentheses. So either term x or y, and you can fill x or y, whatever you want. So we'll go into more detail here. quick word on John Smith. We use John Smith basically because there are so many John Smiths out there, and we can kind of use all the different ones and avoid like displaying public information of any one particular John Smith, but also because it's a pretty difficult search term, and we'll use some of the techniques to zero in on a specific John Smith that we're looking for. So here we've done the basic quotations, University of Arizona and John Smith, and you'll see in the results we have John Smiths and University of Arizona's. So we're getting a little bit more complicated. University of Arizona, John something Smith. We're using the asterisk with a wild card, and we're getting John Maynard Smith, John P. Smith, John Peter Smith. So again, maybe we're zeroing in a little bit more on who we're looking for. And say you were at a social function or a business function and you met a John Smith. He introduced himself as Dr. John Smith. And so we come back to the office and we want to research who this Dr. John Smith was. We know he was affiliated somehow with the University of Arizona. We can do our search, University of Arizona. John something Smith, we didn't catch his middle name. And skip to the last term, that minus obituary. If you noticed in some of the previous slides, some of the John Smiths, that the results that came up were obituaries. But we just happened to meet this guy a couple of days ago. We know he probably is still alive and doesn't have an obituary yet. So we want to omit that, so just a minus sign, minus obituary. And then we do know he's a physician, so we're going to force the inclusion of either doctor or MD. You can also extend this. You can say doctor or MD or physician or obstetrician, anything within the within the parentheses. Okay, and I'm going to be talking about one last thing in Google. Susie is actually going to be covering some more about Google tips later on. But one kind of overlooked thing maybe that Google has available is an image search. So if you meet someone, you have a visual idea of what they look like. Maybe you know their name and that they're affiliated with the U of A. Just do a quick Google image search. And maybe it's this guy who's pouring some wine over here. You can click through on the image and go to the site that's related to this person. Okay, enough of Google. We'll be coming back to it though. So our first poll of the day, how many people use Facebook? Okay, and just as a side note personally, how many people like Facebook? Not quite as many. All right, and how many people have a LinkedIn profile? Almost everyone, which is great. It's great for professional development and to make professional connections. And then how many people have a personal website or a blog that they will admit to in public? Yeah, probably a lot more than that. Okay, so we're going to kind of zero in on the individual websites now. We're going to start with LinkedIn just because a lot of the people that we may want to approach will be executives or professionals out in the community. So you can do a quick Google search, and I'm going to stop real quick and just say, whenever you're looking for someone's profile on social media, it's best to use Google to do the search to find their social media, instead of going to the social media site and using their internal search. It's just much more difficult to find people if you're not already connected to them somehow. Google, it's much easier to find them. So here what I've theoretically done is done a John Smith and then plus to enforce the inclusion of LinkedIn, and this is our result. So on LinkedIn, everybody already knows this, but I'm going to say it real quick anyway. You can find a lot of information about the people that you're looking for. This is self-reported information, and because it's a professional network, a lot of people really want to keep this up to date, so it's actually good current information. You can find their current occupation and title, where they work. A lot of times this is good if you know someone's name and maybe what they do. You meet them at a national conference or something but don't know where they work or where they live. You can find their geographic area, at least of where they work. You can find their professional history, their work experience, the education, not only if they're a U of A graduate, but maybe they have other degrees, PhDs or MBAs from somewhere else that might be relevant. And another thing that I've actually found kind of surprising since I've joined the department is that the summary on LinkedIn is actually a good indicator of how people want to present themselves to the world, to the professional world at least. This John Smith has very concise, succinct, professional style of presenting himself. But I've also seen some, especially for young entrepreneurs and tech companies, they'll say, yo dude, I just want to change the world. So, which may give you an indication of how to approach them and how to relate to them later on. One quick thing about LinkedIn is that LinkedIn does actually report to the profile holder whenever you've viewed their profile. A lot of us are probably familiar with that. You get emails or alerts or something saying so-and-so has viewed your profile. So, which is fine. It's not illegal or unethical in any way to view someone's profile. They have made it public. However, it might make for kind of a slightly awkward conversation later on when you talk to them and they say, oh yeah, I see you've been checking me out on LinkedIn. You may not want to know that. So that there are account and privacy settings in LinkedIn. You can make yourself totally anonymous so that people won't be able to see that you've been viewing their profile. However, if you do that, you also won't be able to see that people are viewing your profile. So if you happen to be looking for a new position and want to know who's scouting you, which nobody in here is doing, I'm sure, you won't be able to see that. Change your privacy settings. One last thing on LinkedIn. We are talking mostly today about trying to find people and find information about people that we already know. LinkedIn is a good source for actually prospecting and finding new names of people that you may not know will have an affiliation with you. LinkedIn has a connections search. It's just on the main menu of LinkedIn. And you can mix and match different categories of people that you may be looking for. For instance, if you're looking for someone like people in San Diego who are electrical engineers and are graduates of U of A, you can actually search for all those terms and see results, the resulting profiles. A note on this is that the more networked you are within LinkedIn, the more networks that you're affiliated with, the more actual names you'll be able to see on these results. So you can practice that on your own if you haven't already. Okay, business sites, websites are actually great. Say we know that we met a John Smith or know of a John Smith who works at Crystal and Company. We can do a really simple Google search, and our first result happened to be the Crystal and Company website. And there's a staff directory or a leadership directory. They will be known as different things in different companies. Sometimes they're in the contact us or about us or leadership menu or board or trustee. But these are really good sources of information because if you were to click through on this, you may be able to find all kinds of contact information for this person. And this may seem a little obvious, but there's other kinds of information available in this too. And Susie's going to be talking a little bit more about it. But you can often find their direct phone numbers and emails this way. And you can find out other information. Usually, most executives or officers of companies will have personal statements that will talk about themselves. And what's great about that is it won't talk just about their professional experience like it would on LinkedIn, but it'll also include information about the awards they've received, volunteering that they do, charitable organizations that they're affiliated with. And just a quick note of caution, we get a lot of requests in our department for just people wanting to find business emails to be able to send an email to someone. And so what we would do is just do a quick Google search using these kind of terms, John Smith, and then plus to force the inclusion of an @ and then the domain name of the company, which is just saying we want the email that this person has at this company. So that's a nice little trick to find those. Hopefully the first few results you get will be actual emails. It'll be either the company website itself or it'll be some sort of online correspondence that the person has made publicly available out there on the internet. You'll also get results from companies claiming that they know the email of the person you're trying to contact. And these are often sales companies, basically companies that facilitate spam, more or less. It's usually like something like SalesSpider or Lead 411, and these are not going to be accurate emails. They're just going to be guessing, saying, oh, usually this company uses John.Smith, but not always. So don't trust those. Business entity search. Every state, almost every state, has a corporation commission that oversees the businesses within that state, and most states have searchable databases of the businesses. And these are not just for corporations, but also for partnerships, for trade names, DBAs, sometimes sole proprietorships. So if you meet someone at a function or know of someone who has a company, let's say John Smith and Associates, which is what we're going to be searching for, we could go to the State Corporation Commission and do a business entity search, and we're searching for John Smith and Associates. And sure enough, what comes up here is John Smith and Associates Incorporated. And the thing we're really looking for here is that there's a domestic address, there's a mailing address right there for the company. And we're finding with a lot of online companies, they actually don't have physical addresses, everything is virtual. So this may be a way to find a physical address for the company or for an individual. Also, you can find information about statutory agent, other addresses. Statutory agent is usually, if it's a very small company, it's usually the person themselves that runs the company or a relative. Could be a CPA or an attorney also. One of the interesting things here, though, is that underneath, if you were to scroll down on this, you would see that there are annual report filings or incorporation documents that you can click through to. There'll be PDFs that you can bring up and see the actual documents. And often those documents will have other kinds of contact information, usually addresses and phone numbers. So it's something to be aware of in case you know a company but not much else. So back to social media. I'm not going to use Facebook because I don't like Facebook. So we're saying this is a different John Smith. We Googled John Smith and Twitter, and we found John Smith's profile. And it's kind of surprising how much information people put out there publicly about themselves. We can see our John Smith here. He's a singer and guitarist. He's not signed, by the way, so if you want to sign him to a record label later, that's great. He lives in England. He joined Twitter in a certain place, but one of the interesting things is these photos and videos. You can actually see information maybe about his family or his home or vacations he's taken. Of course, Twitter feed, you can see maybe what political interest or social or hobbies that he has. But the thing we're looking for right now is the fact that this person put johnsmith.com as his website, which will lead us to more information later on. I'm not going to use johnsmith.com as a website in my next slide. I'm going to use John A. Smith. But whenever someone creates a website or registers a domain name, there's an international registry that keeps track of those domain names and who registered them. So say we have a virtual company, johnasmith.com, or someone's personal website, johnasmith.com. There's no contact information directly on the website. We can do a whois lookup, and there are lots of different sites that will do whois lookups, but my favorite is whois.com. So say we enter johnasmith.com into the search box, and we see a bunch of gobbledygook come up. But in the middle of the gobbledygook is John Smith's mailing address, his phone number, and his email. So again, just something to be aware of if this is an avenue of contact. The assessor's office, if someone owns property in a certain county, most counties make this information publicly available and searchable. Laura's going to be talking a little bit more about the assessor's pages later on. But if you know that somebody has property, maybe where they have property in town, but maybe they don't live here all year round, and you're wanting to know what their permanent address is, we're going to do John Smith. Say we know that he has property in Diamond Bell Ranch here in Pima County, and we were able to find that. On the far side, you can see the property description, but the thing we're really looking for is his permanent address, the taxpayer information, where he's having his tax documents sent to, is right there. So if you need to send him an invitation or a letter of introduction, this may be the way to do it. And finally, we omitted the obituaries earlier, but now we're bringing them back. So obituaries are actually really interesting because they're written histories of people's families. They're fascinating documents. So often someone, if you're searching for someone, obituaries will come up, It won't be the obituary necessarily for the person, hopefully, but they may show up as children of the deceased person or relatives or caregivers or somehow affiliated with the family. And you can actually find a lot of great history about the family, maybe where your prospect was born, or names of their relatives, their brothers and sisters. A pretty interesting thing that you can often find is the charitable interest of the family. For instance, in this particular obituary, there is something that says memorials may be made to Shriners Children's Hospital. So if your particular program has anything to do with children's health, that may be something you want to be aware of. And then, if you happen to find that Big John Smith served in the Second World War with MacArthur, and then he had a sister who was from England, and then you want to find out what their parents did, you can end up here. So, as Emily kind of said, get what you need and get out. So not everything is going to be relative. Pay attention, but don't go too deep. And just real quickly, some additional sites to consider. I think these are on the handouts. Whitepages.com. Try that first. It's the most useful. We'll be taking questions later on. Whitepages.com is definitely the first place to check. Unfortunately, with the advent of cell phones, most cell phones are unlisted, and it's getting harder and harder to find contact information, any kind of addresses or phone numbers through Whitepages, but try that first. One of the things it's really great for, though, is that it has a reverse phone search available. So if you're looking for previous donors and you want to know if that phone number is still good for that person, do a reverse phone search on them. Also, any kind of state licensing boards are really good to find contact information for people. If it's a physician, an attorney, any kind of counseling therapist, psychologist, any kind of pharmacist, there are a lot of licensing organizations for states that will have searchable databases. And you can find out if the person's license or certification is current, and usually what business they're affiliated with. Often these databases will also have click-through documents that you can find personal information, addresses and phone numbers. Two others real quick, and these may or may not be on your handouts, but ZabaSearch and ZoomInfo, they both have paid options, and the paid options have curated data where people have actually gone in and checked to make sure that things are accurate. But the free options that are available, you may want to just look at. The information is not necessarily going to be really accurate or really current, or in the case of John Smith, it may mix up different John Smith. Just know that may be a place to start, and it may give you hints that will lead you on to somewhere else. So we each have our top 3 recommended resources today, and my top 3 are LinkedIn, pretty self-explanatory. Business websites, because not only can you find contact information, but additional information as well. And then Whois, just because a lot of people don't know that actually exists out there. Okay. Hopefully I haven't tired you out. We still have a lot more to show you, and I'm going to hand it over to Laura now.
Hello? Hello, and hopefully we won't look like that at the end of this. Now that Jason has showed you how to find some basic contact information and employment information, I'm going to go on and show you how to find some basic wealth indicators that will let you know whether your prospect is worth pursuing. First, I'm going to give you an overview of what's available out there, what is in the public arena. Some of the reasons this information is out there is simply because we have laws in this country that mandate transparency. This information is usually reported to a government entity, such as the Securities and Exchange Commission, to guard against illegal or unethical practices such as insider trading. So what can we find? We'll start with real estate. Real estate is out there. All this information is on the assessor's office, and the reason the assessor's office is available for you to use is because so you can know that you're being taxed at the same rate that your neighbor is, and there's no shenanigans going on. Stock holdings. The only stock holdings we can legally find are only for the officers and directors and 10% owners of public companies. This information is reported to the SEC. Salary information. The only information we can usually find, there's two kinds. There's the top 5 officers of a public company, and that's because it's reported to the SEC. And then it's the salaries of government employees, such as yourselves, that's available. And on your handout, there's a website you can go to if you want to check on your coworkers' salaries. For everyone else, we use salary estimators. Other assets. Yes, you can find that someone has a yacht, or someone has a plane, or they have an art collection, and you can go and find, excuse me, what they're valued at. There are websites that will let you do that. Political contributions. Political contributions are a real good indicator of wealth because they're not tax deductible and they're made from disposable income. The information is reported to the Federal Elections Commission and is in the public arena. And Susie is going to go into detail about those. And family foundations, again, it's a good indicator of two things. First of all, that the person is philanthropically minded, and two, that they have assets to put away. And Susie will go into that again in more detail. But please keep in mind, we can't find every detail, and truthfully, you don't need to know that. Don't get stuck trying to find every last bit of information. If you find that your prospect does have wealth, by using these indicators, just stop what you're doing, go on and start cultivating. Don't get bogged down. Now, what can't we find? We can never find out what's in somebody's bank account or in their brokerage account. We can never find the actual salaries of people who work for private companies. We'll never find the stock holdings of anyone who isn't an officer and a director of a public company. And things such as academic records or medical records or trust agreements, never find that. And please don't ask us to run credit reports on individuals. That's happened. We can't do that, and we won't. Okay, I'm going to go back to the assessor's office. Now, Jason showed you how to do it to find addresses. I'll show you how to use it to find some more information. Now, you can go in that quick search and put in the taxpayer name, or I hope you can see the advanced search there. Click on that, and it'll take you here. And again, you can use the taxpayer's name, but please be advised that some taxpayers, especially the real estate investors, they hide their assets in the names of their company or an LLC, or it's a family trust. So you may want to search by property, by the property address. And it's not just in Arizona that you can find this information. It's all across the country. And I'm giving you a site here. Christina Pulowski is a well-known prospect research consultant. And she's put together this little database of tax assessors across the country and also in the U.S. Virgin Islands. So you can click on any of these and find an assessor's office. But now that we found the assessed value, let's go on to market value. Have any of you ever used Zillow to find out your market value of your home or your neighbor's home? Good. Here we have one of our prospects. This is a real property in Paradise Valley, and he really is one of our prospects. I'm not sure you can see that, but this is his home, and it's worth $12 million. Now, the good thing about using Zillow is not only do you get to see the market value of the home, but you can see where it's situated. You can see what it looks like. We see here that this home is located on a very big lot. Or you may have a prospect who lives in a little subdivision. We can also see if they have things like swimming pools and tennis courts, or I suspect that's a putting green. So it's nice to know. It gives you an idea of your prospect's wealth. Now we're going to move on to stock holdings. Now, as I said, stock holdings are only available for officers and directors and 10% owners of public companies. So here we've gone back to our friend John Smith. Now this is a website called Market Watch, and I included this because it really is the easiest one to use and very simple, just type in a name. Now our friend John Smith here is a director at Procter & Gamble, and I hope you can see that his stock holdings here are worth about $5.5 million. So you can tell that obviously Mr. Smith has a lot of stock and is probably very wealthy, and that means he's going to be a good prospect. But it's also telling you some more. He's probably got a lot of appreciated stock holdings. Now, a lot of wealthy prospects they can't sell those stocks unless they want to pay capital gains. So these are really good prospects for you to get a stock gift from. So he can get his tax deduction. Salaries. Now, actual compensation is only available for these top people at public companies. And the easiest way to find this is to Google. And as Jason was explaining, we use our searches of the executive name plus the company name plus the word salary. And the top hits we're going to get are from Forbes and from Businessweek. And we also use salary surveys to estimate salary. And the one we like to use the most is called Indeed, because again, it's a very simple search. Now I've gone away from John Smith and I'm using one of our real prospects here. His name is Robert Eckert, and he was the CEO of Mattel until he retired in 2011, because I wanted you to see what you really can find. And when I put his name in, Robert Eckert plus Mattel plus salary, my first hit is from Forbes, and my last hit on the bottom is from Businessweek. And when I go to open the Forbes, I get this lovely picture and all this information about Mr. Eckert. His compensation in 2011 was almost $17 million. It also tells me, yes, he went to the U of A. He also got his MBA at Northwestern. So we know he's a good prospect. But who is he a prospect for? As we went into before, as Emily explained, affinity is more important really than capacity. And yes, Mr. Eckert is a good prospect for the U of A, and he does have strong affinity, but unless you're from Eller, don't bother writing down the name, because that's where he gives his money. Now, for most everyone else, let's face it, the Robert Eckerts in this world are few and far between. Most of our prospects are going to be local people, and if we were in Chicago or if we were in New York, we might have a bigger pool of these top executives, but we're not. We're in Tucson. So we're going to use the salary survey to get an estimate. And I'm looking for a chief financial officer in Tucson, Arizona. And it's very important to put in that location. And we can see from here that the starting salary average is $117,000. And that is a starting salary. These come from job postings. So obviously, if you have someone who's been doing this for a while, the salary is going to be more. And at the bottom there, you see there are some outliers. At a hospital, the starting salary of a chief financial officer is $141,000. And you will also, I hope you can see that, it says that the starting salaries in Tucson are 15% lower than they are for the rest of the country. So that's why it's important to know your location. Political contributions. I'm only going to go into this briefly, but there is a strong correlation between high lifetime political giving and high philanthropic capacity. Political gifts are made from disposable income and are not tax deductible. And while there are limits to the donation you can make to an individual candidate, those limits are much higher to giving to national organizations. And this is a slide from the FEC which showing what an individual can give. The limits for this past cycle was $2,600 for an individual candidate, or $32,400 to a national political organizations. This obviously does not include that so-called black money that we read about all the time, that giving to the 527 organizations, which don't have to report their donors. That's why it's so popular with some of our highest wealth people. Other assets. Yes, it's fun. I mean, we can look, you find that somebody has a yacht. It's a 100-foot yacht. Can you find out what it's worth? Yes, you can. Do you need to know that? Not really. I mean, it's just enough to know that he has a yacht. You don't need to know what its value is. But if you want to have fun, go ahead. We never talk about net worth, and we have development officers who ask us this question all the time. What is so-and-so's net worth? And the reason we don't is net worth is someone's assets minus their liabilities. And while we may find assets, we're never going to find their liabilities. Now, there are sites up here, Forbes, Celebrity Net Worth, and the richest. They tell you that they can find net worth. Don't believe them. I mean, they're fun to peruse and look at, but they're guessing too. So don't take them seriously. And what to do if you can't find anything. Don't panic. It happens to us all the time. You may be searching and you're just not finding any information. Does this mean your person is not a good prospect? No, it doesn't. It just means that there isn't a lot of publicly available information. In 1996, a book was published called The Millionaire Next Door. And it talks about the person who is your neighbor. You may not know he's a millionaire, but he is. He's a good investor or he's a smart businessman. He doesn't own the fancy homes and he doesn't have a yacht. And, someone like Warren Buffett still lives in the same house that he bought in the 1950s. And if you ever looked at his real estate holdings, you wouldn't think he was one of the richest men on the planet, but he is. So remember that these are just wealth indicators, and they do not tell you anything about their philanthropic interest or their affinity with your program, which is ultimately the most important thing. My top 3 resources are Zillow, the assessor's office, Pima County, or any of the others, and MarketWatch. Oh no. Now I'm going to turn it over to Susie, who's going to talk about philanthropic affiliations.
Thank you, Laura. That was brilliant. So now we're at a point where we've identified some individuals who have capacity or wealth, and hopefully we have some connections or ways to get to them. But the next question is, are they philanthropic? Do they give? And do their philanthropic interests align with our program? Right? So they might have all the money in the world, but they might decide to keep it all to pass down to their children, or they might decide to spend it all on their yachts and their champagne and caviar, whatever. Some people just are not philanthropic. And then on the other hand, there are people who are very philanthropic, but they have a single specific cause that they are very passionate about, and that's all that they will ever give to. And so you don't want to waste your time on any of those people. So where can we find clues about their philanthropic interests? And what can we actually find out? We can usually find out if they serve on nonprofit boards. We can find some of their giving to other organizations, to other nonprofits, if it's published somewhere. We can find information about their campaign contributions, because most of that does have to be publicly reported, unless it's that dark money. And we can find detailed information about grants made by their family foundation, if they happen to have one. And I'm also going to talk a little bit later on about donor-advised funds. So we can't find out a lot about them, but it's a very interesting indicator if they do happen to have one. So a strong indicator of how philanthropic a prospect is if they serve on boards. So it can show how connected they are in their community or even nationally, and it indicates their passions or the causes that resonate most strongly with them. If you think about it, in order to serve on a board, You have to have a strong affinity to the organization. You have to have a strong belief in its mission, and you generally have to be willing to financially support that organization as well. So where can you find what boards your prospect serves on? It might be mentioned on their bio of their company website. You can also try Google searching their name along with phrases like board or trustee. And I'll go over some of these more advanced Google search techniques in just a minute. And occasionally it might even be mentioned on their LinkedIn page or their other social media as well. And I always like to verify the items that I find in company bios because they might be somewhat outdated. So I just do a quick check on the nonprofit's website to see if they're still listed on the current board list. And GuideStar.org is a good free resource for information about nonprofits. So those list the board members and officers going back for several years. So this is just an example of a bio from a company website. This is our same John Smith I think we saw earlier. And he lists various organizations that he's affiliated with down here at the bottom. So that kind of lets us know how that he's very connected in the community, and it gives us a sense of his philanthropic interests. So we can see he is, I don't know if you guys can see that in the back, but we can see that his interests are children and hospitals, health, there's a couple hospitals mentioned, music, he's on the board of a symphony, and also education. So if your program is that you're fundraising for is related to the environment or engineering, then you might stop at this point. He might not be a good fit for you. And this is a sample just from the board list of a nonprofit's website, and you can usually find the board list just on the About or the Leadership page section of the website. This one has a detailed bio, which in turn lists a lot of other organizations that this John Smith is involved with, and gives us more clues to his interests and other possible connections. And another way to explore a prospect's various connections is through relationship mapping. And one free site that you can use to do this is called Muckety. And you can search for an individual or organization, and it will show their connections to other individuals or organizations. So in this case, this John Smith in the middle is connected to these 4 organizations, and it shows what type of relationships they are. Now, not everyone is on Muckety. They only include what they term to be national power brokers, but this can kind of help you identify how influential your prospect is. Muckety also assigns a score of how influential they think this person is. So this John Smith is a 70 out of 100. And relationship mapping is kind of a new trend in prospect research. So there are a lot of companies starting up right now that will do this sort of relationship mapping as a paid service as well. And Muckety is highly interactive. So each of these other individuals or organizations you can click on, and then you'll see, in turn, you'll see all of their connections. So just a word of caution from our little bunny here. Once you start clicking, it's very easy to fall down that rabbit hole when you just start going and clicking on connections of connections of connections. So next, we want to look for evidence of charitable giving to other organizations. So past giving tells us that our prospect is philanthropic, they do give. And it also tells us what types of organizations they're interested in. So have they only given to animal and horse organizations in the past, or have they given to a whole variety of causes? And prior giving can also give us a sense of how much they're giving to other organizations, which might also be helpful to you in determining an ask amount. Now, you won't be able to find all the gifts that a prospect gives to other organizations, but you may be able to find some. Mostly you're just sort of looking for evidence of charitable giving in these publicly available sources, such as press releases or gift announcements, news articles, publish donor lists or annual reports. So now I'm going to expand a little more on some of these Google techniques that Jason mentioned earlier. And you'll see I used here his wildcard asterisk search and quotation marks for this John Smith. And then all of these Google techniques and operators are on your pink handout. So here we typed in our name along with some other choice sort of keyword search terms like gift, or you could use donation. In this case, I used million. And I did come up with a gift announcement on Cornell's website for a $10 million gift. And to get a little more specific, even say we had a donor, we met John Smith at a party, and we knew that they had attended Cornell. But we didn't yet know about their $10 million gift. But we wanted to search for their name only within the Cornell website for any mention, in the hopes that we might find evidence of some giving to Cornell. So here we typed in our John Smith. We also learned his wife's name, so John or Diane Smith, and we are using the cite operator. We're only searching within Cornell's website only. And then in this case, we came up with our gift announcement and also some other articles. You know, we're looking to see, is their name listed on an advisory board? Is it listed on a donor roll or annual report? And this is the cite operator, allows us to do that. And then, since we're specifically interested in charitable giving to nonprofits or educational institutions, you can also use the cite operator to search only within a specific type of website. So search only within .org or .edu websites only. So again, we're sort of narrowing down. And this, you can see here, I typed in cite edu or cite.org in parentheses, and that or has to be all caps. And so in this example, now we're pulling up more organizations that this John and Diane Smith are involved with, beyond just Cornell. So now we find they also are involved with Mount Mercy University, the Cedar Rapids Chamber of Commerce, and the Cedar Rapids Opera. And we're seeing links to donor rolls where their names are listed. And just a note about donor rolls and annual reports, you won't usually get the exact amount of their gift, but their names are often listed under categories or giving ranges. So, for example, $10,000 to $99,999. And then oftentimes these annual reports and donor rolls are posted online in PDF format. So you can narrow your search even further and only look for this specific file type. So when we put in our same John and Diane Smith, with the operator for file type, just PDF, we're only pulling up, hopefully, some more of these donor lists. So each of these is a link to the actual PDF document. And one thing I wanted to point out here, we found, on this last gift here to Cedar Rapids Public Library, we see that they actually gave this gift from their donor advised fund held at the Cedar Rapids Community Foundation. So we just want to make a note that they have a donor advised fund. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So you can also just try to combine all the possible name variations if you wanted to try and do kind of a lot of this all in one giant search. So think of all the ways that this person's name might be listed on a donor list or an annual report. So I just did one long search string that includes all the possible name variations. In parentheses, we've got quotes, we've got or in all caps. And here's our one long search string. All right. And just a reminder before you fall down the rabbit hole that is the internet, doing internet research, don't forget about paper. So if you can, get your hands on hard copies of these, newsletters, annual reports, donor lists, playbills, all these things, that list names of donors. And we also can use those sort of lists for proactively. So to find donors to organizations that might have similar missions to ours. So by proactive, I mean identifying new prospects as opposed to researching prospects that we've already identified. So you can take that annual report of an organization with a similar mission and just go through that donor list and see if you recognize any names. Show it to show it to other people in your network, see if they recognize any of those names, and then you can also compare those names to our database as well. All right, and then one last site, another free website that you can use for looking up charitable gifts is Million Dollar List. Although it focuses only on gifts of $1 million or higher. You can use it to do a lookup search of just an individual prospect, or it can be, you can also use it proactively to, for example, you could drill down and try to find a list of donors who have given, $1 million or more to the subsector of arts, culture, and humanities in the state of Arizona, and then come up with a list, that sort of thing. And again, with all charitable giving to other organizations, it's important to remember that we're not going to find all of it, or we may not even find any of it. If the donor prefers to give anonymously, we won't be able to find their gifts. And if their particular nonprofits don't publish their donor list, then we also won't find it as well. So unlike charitable giving, which can be kind of hit or miss in whether we're able to find it, there's a lot of information that we can find about political contributions. And luckily, these political contributions also correlate highly with charitable giving. So one statistic I saw is that a donor who's given $2,500 or more in political contributions is 14 times more likely to make a philanthropic donation than the average person. So that's a very strong correlation. So there's several websites you can use to look up these political contributions. I like the Federal Election Commission, the one the government produces. This is their individual contribution search, where you can just look up an individual's name, or you can do an advanced search if you have a very common name like John Smith. And then this is what the results look like. And they give summaries for the different types of giving. So when I'm looking at these political contributions, I'm not looking at necessarily who they're giving to. I don't care if it's a Democrat or Republican, unless that happens to be relevant to your area. But what I'm looking for is whether they're giving, how often are they giving, and how much are they giving. So this possibly might also give you a sense of what a baseline ask amount might be, right? So the smallest gift I would ask for this John Smith would be $1,000, because he's written several $1,000 checks within a very small time frame. So I'm thinking he can write those $1,000 checks pretty easily. They're not even tax deductible. And then also here we see that you can click through to the source document on this site. So this is a sample of what the actual form filed with the FEC looks like. And then there's a couple other bits of information that you can get from these source documents also. So you could get a mailing address, so that might be a new address if you didn't have it. You also can find their employer and occupation. So if you didn't already know that, that's another place you can look for that. And then there are a couple other sites you can use for political contributions. I think Laura's favorite is Open Secrets. And another one I also like is Campaign Money. That one can also be used for proactive research or identifying new names. So there are many fields that you can search by on that one. And you could pull a list, if you do their advanced search, you can pull a list of, say, all anesthesiologists in the state of Arizona who've made political contributions. and then you actually can download that list into an Excel spreadsheet. And it has their address, everything, a lot of information. Okay, so another type of giving information that we can find is foundation grants. And our focus for today's presentation is individual donors. So in this case, we're only really looking at family foundations in order to enlighten us about their individual philanthropic interests that might be conveyed through their foundation giving. So if you are looking for foundation grants to fund your project or program, see the Gift Center staff, because that's a whole other topic. There is a lot of publicly available information that these foundations have to report to the IRS on what are called Form 990s. And those list the board members, the total asset size of the foundation, it lists all the grantees and the exact grant amounts. And a fantastic resource for information about foundations is the Foundation Directory Online. There is a free version, it's a limited free version that you can access anywhere. And then the full version is available anywhere on campus now through the UA Library, which is great. And it's searchable by grants, officers, location. And if you're interested in Foundation Directory, there is training on this available from the Gift Center. And this is just Foundation Directory itself, and it shows you that I just wanted to point out that you can search an individual name here to see if they're associated with the foundation. And then you can also click through to the actual form filed with the IRS. There's great information, these 990s. And you can see all the organizations that they give to and the exact amount that they give to each organization in a year. And when I'm looking at these grant lists, I'm looking for patterns in their giving. So do they only give in certain geographic areas? Even if their guidelines might say they give to a specific geographic area, are you seeing grants made in Tucson or other places as well? What types of organizations are they giving to? Do they only give certain types of support, like scholarships or funding for medical research, that sort of thing. So lots of great information in those. And a couple more, these are just a couple more free sites that you can use that have 990s available for all nonprofits, not just foundations. And again, all these links are in your handouts. Okay, and then just a little tip that these 990s also can be used to find salaries for all the top executives within nonprofit organizations, or their board members if their board members are paid. So it's just another source for some possible salary information. Okay, and then I just wanted to mention donor advised funds, as these are some of the fastest growing philanthropic vehicles. And how they work is that the donor gets the tax break when they open up the fund or when they add to their fund, and then they can recommend that grants be made from that fund. And these types of funds are held at either like Fidelity or Schwab or Vanguard charitable gift funds, or some of them are also held at community foundations, Jewish community foundations, that sort of organization. And unfortunately, they are not transparent in the same way that foundation grants are. So foundations have to make their grants public, whereas these donor advised funds don't. Now, you might happen to know that your donor has a donor advised fund, either because they made a past gift through it or because you happen to see that name listed on a donor roll like we saw earlier. And if you happen to know that your prospect has a donor advised fund, then you know that they're philanthropic. You know that they have some capacity, right? There are minimums to create these funds, and the average fund size is usually, over $200,000. And you also know that they have this pot of money sitting there that they have to spend, they have to give to a nonprofit. Now, again, you need to learn as much as you can about your donor and their interests to know whether there's a chance that they're going to give that money to you and to your program. Okay, now, before I show you my top 3 sources, I have a quick poll. So, how many of you have a library card? All right. And if you have one, then you know that the library is awesome. And if you don't have a library card, then run, don't walk, and to your nearest branch and go get one. Because the library rocks. So somehow this turned into a quick little plug for the library, or libraries, because I'm actually talking about both the UA Library and the Pima County Public Library. So the UA Library has the Foundation Directory online available, and it also has a bunch of newspaper databases, which are great for doing research, and it also has databases with company or industry information for if you're researching prospects who own private companies. Great, great, great resources. And the Pima County Public Library has the Foundation Directory also, and plus they also offer regular workshops on fundraising, and they have a lot of resources available for nonprofits and for fundraising. And most of those are at the main branch downtown. This is what their website looks like. So go check out your libraries. And here's my top 3 resources for researching philanthropic affiliation. So Federal Election Commission, because I love those, drilling down to those source documents. For charitable giving, there are some very useful paid resources, like NOZA is one that aggregate all that information from donor lists and annual reports. But for a free resource, the best is Google. And then my other favorite is the Foundation Directory, which is available at either the UA or your public library. So I'm going to hand things back over to Emily.
All right, so hopefully everyone is not super overwhelmed. We just went through a lot of information. I'm just going to sum it up really quickly and then open it up to questions. So I think the key message or the key takeaway that we hope you walk away from this session with is to kind of start with affinity and end with affinity. Affinity is really going to be the most important aspect of doing research. That's the thing you want to focus on. The wealth and contact information can help guide you in terms of what might be the right gift amount. Can you actually contact those people? But none of that's going to matter if they don't have some kind of pattern of affinity to your program or project. So these are the 4 questions I think are important that you ask yourself as you go through the process. So do you actually have a list of people that you know already have affinity to you? If so, start with them. Do you have a way to contact those people? If not, do your research. Do you know if those people have the means or capacity to financially support you? If you're not sure, do your research. And have you confirmed that those people are in fact, 1, philanthropic, and 2, philanthropic in the areas that are aligned with your program? So that's it. I guess at this point I'll open it up to questions. Does anyone have questions?
Can I have a microphone for you to use?
Yes, Amy will walk around with a microphone, and we might switch off on the podium. Yes.
My question's for Jason. When you were talking about whitepages.com, Jason, I'm old enough to remember when you would go there and type in a name and a city, it would give you the name and the address. Is there a way now to circumvent all those sponsored sites that they're trying to shove down our throats?
No.
Thanks, Jason.
Sure. No, actually, I just want to kind of reiterate that do start with white pages, because often you can get just really good results with that. But cell phones, sometimes hard to find.
I was just going to ask, I'm Tammy from Eller. I was just going to ask if this is available electronically, because these links are all nicely embedded in here, and it would be great if we could get a copy of this and then just keep it as a handy resource.
So yes, we've had something like that on our website for a while. We updated it for the session, so our plan is to have the website updated with that document.
Okay.
And we can certainly ask the Gift Center to maybe send that out as well to the group of people that RSVP'd for this.
And then one more question about Wealth Engine. When we see Wealth Engine data rating information about our prospects and what their wealth capacity is, can you give us a sense of how they come up with that number?
Yeah, I'll let Laura speak to that.
Okay, Wealth Engine is one of our paid resources, and we use it to get capacity ratings for our prospects. And it depends on the prospect. Most of that information for most of our prospects is really based on their real estate holdings, because that's the one asset that we can find for just about anyone. If someone has stock holdings, that's taken account for, and Wealth Engine will use that to increase the rating. But most of them it's based on real estate.
Any other questions?
Oh, I just wanted to add to that one too, real quickly, for those of you who aren't familiar with capacity ratings. A capacity rating is an estimate of what that donor prospect could give over a 5-year period. So, and it's just an estimate, and it's what they could give to all organizations, not just ours necessarily.
One of the questions that I have comes to the ethics list that I haven't read.
Mm-hmm.
But in my previous organization, a lot of times the physicians would say they had a client, a patient who they thought would give, and I'm wondering whether that's on the list of people you know, and that would be an ethical way to approach people.
So that's getting into kind of grateful patient fundraising, and there's a whole slew of regulations around that called HIPAA. So the HIPAA regulations are focused on patient privacy, and so I would say if you're going down that path, get really familiar, because there are legal implications in terms of how you handle patient data. So patients basically should have an opportunity to opt out. If they don't opt out, then it's reasonable to have them sort of included in development activity, but there's regulations. I don't want to get into it, it's very complicated, but regulations around what should be shared, what the development office is allowed to know. Should the patient find out that the development office knows more than they should legally, they can file a lawsuit. So HIPAA adds a whole layer of complexity around sort of medical fundraising that I would say get familiar with. Yeah. And there's typically there's several organizations that do regular webinars on how to manage kind of HIPAA regulations for development. So, you know, if you want some of those resources, let us know. But yeah, HIPAA's fun.
Do you have any other quick suggestions besides HIPAA for, regulations, policies we should check into?
So the other big one, especially since we're a university, is FERPA, which is related to student information privacy. So that's the other one. Anyone who has access to our database, our development database on campus, is actually required to go through FERPA training and pass a test. So the two big ones are sort of, getting familiar with the ethics statement that I posted, HIPAA and FERPA. Those are the main ones that kind of regulate development and fundraising.
Any other questions? Last chance.
And we'll be here for a while after the session, so if you have questions that you're embarrassed to ask, come see us. Thank you, everyone. We're glad everyone came. Hopefully you found something useful. That's it. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.
We just really want to thank the Prospect Management team for blowing our minds, and with all these resources. If you want more information about the Foundation Directory online training that they mentioned offered by the Gift Center, there's just a sign-up sheet. Write your name down and we'll contact you. So thank you again, everybody, for coming.